Welcome to Begley's Mailbag here on SNY.TV, where we answer your questions about the Knicks and the NBA. And we're going to start off right now with Dylan Backer. Dylan wants to know, could the Knicks still trade Immanuel Quickley, given his recent performances with RJ Barrett out? Now, Quickley has been fantastic as a starter, played big minutes, shot the ball really well. But I don't think his performance as a starter versus coming off the bench would really factor into anything the Knicks did or didn't do with Quickley here at the trade deadline. As we sit here right now, January 10th, I don't think that the Knicks are actively trying to set a market for Quickley. As far as the trade market goes, I don't think they're actively calling teams and looking to see what those teams would give up for Immanuel Quickley. At the same time, I don't think anybody is totally off limits via trade on this roster. So if a team called up the Knicks and said, hey, we're going to give you player X, who's a multi-time All-Star and a couple of picks, I think the Knicks would engage in conversations because, again, no one's off limits via trade. But I don't think that they're actively trying to shop Immanuel Quickley. I think both sides are relatively happy with where things are at the moment. Quickley, obviously, extension eligible this offseason. The more he plays like he has over the past few weeks, the bigger the salary he's going to command in those extension talks, you would think, is. So that's something to consider for the Knicks. But I think, relatively speaking, right now, everybody's happy. So I don't think anybody's looking for a way out of the Quickley-Knicks relationship. I would assume that Quickley, as you continue to move forward here, he continues to play well. He's going to want bigger minutes. But I think if the Knicks can, figure out a great midpoint between giving him bigger minutes and finding a role for other players, I think everything will work out here. But again, right now, January 10th, don't see the Knicks actively shopping Immanuel Quickley at all. Next, we've got one from Triple M. What's up? And Triple M wants to know, you think the Knicks will be aggressive in trying to move that Dallas top 10 pick that they have in 2023, this trade deadline? Or do you see him holding on to that and going into the draft with it? So I think that when you talk about anything the Knicks are going to do at the trade deadline now, you look at what their record is right now, and you look at what their record is as you get closer to February. And I think if they're at 4 games over, 3 games over 500, and they're winning games and showing competency, I don't see them making the kind of move where you're attaching draft picks and, your young players and making a huge trade, franchise-altering trade at the deadline because, that's the kind of move that you would make at that point with this roster because you have to think to yourself, who can we get back who is better than who we have in our rotation now? In order to do that, you're going to have to give up a lot. So I think if the Knicks are kind of where they are now, 3 games over 500, I wouldn't expect them to be attaching assets to make a big move at the deadline. But if they struggle, if there's a losing skid, if they have some ugly losses that they string together, I think the pressure turns up then internally to make a move to get back on the winning path, on a path where you're going to be above 500 and show progression. So to answer that question in a short way, just look at the record. Look at where they are late January, early February. I think that'll tell you a lot about the Knicks and what they might do at the deadline. Got a query here from Johan Peters. Compared to your behind-the-scenes impressions of teams in the NBA, how would you describe the current group? Now, I think that we spend a lot less time in the locker room now than we had pre-pandemic. So I just want to give that as context. But in talking to people around this team and talking to people familiar with the locker room dynamic, I think what you hear is this is a group that there's a lot of solid citizens in the locker room. And so if there's, a losing skid, if there is a rough patch, the team is not going to splinter in the locker room. I don't think there's going to be a lot of finger pointing in that locker room. I think there's a lot of good character in that locker room. And that's what you generally hear about this team from people who've spent a lot of time with the players. And that matters, not so much on the court, but off the court, again, dealing with adversity, dealing with, trade rumors, dealing with players who are up for contract in the coming offseason. That stuff can impact an NBA locker room. And I think what I've heard consistently about this group is just solid characters, and they're not going to really cause problems and create kind of upheaval amid rough patches in the season. They're going to remain together. So that's a credit to them, obviously, and it's a credit to the Knicks bringing in high character guys as well. We got one from KNYT Hoops, who's most likely to be moved at the trade deadline. This one to me is easy. Cam Reddish. Cam Reddish, not in the Knick rotation. Haven't seen any evidence of late that he would be back in the rotation, barring a lot of injuries. I think that's what it would take for him to get minutes under Tom Thibodeau again. I'm not sure exactly what specifically happened there, but it seems like he's going to be a DNP up until the deadline, and the Knicks figure out the best way to move him, get him to a different team, whether it's he alone in a trade or he as part of a package with other players to bring somebody back. But to me, he's the odds-on favorite to get moved, which in a big picture sense makes you scratch your head. Knicks giving up Kevin Knox and a protected first to get Cam Reddish, obviously taking a bit of a flyer on him. But then you fast forward to now, this trade deadline, moving him again, and I don't think they'd get much back for him. So just seems to me like a strike against the Knicks front office, the way this Cam Reddish situation has unfolded thus far. Got one from Dark Steve 590, and Dark Steve wants to know realistic trade targets for the Knicks. When you look at around the league, players who could be available, you look at a Jay Crowder in Phoenix. Obviously, he's going to be available. He in Phoenix, they're not able to work out a future there. So he's going to be available, but he's going to want a contract extension from any team that he gets moved to. So he could be a realistic target, but I don't see a perfect fit there for the Knicks. You look at the situation in Utah where they could move heading to the deadline. You know, Malik Beasley, I think, could be available. He's a player that the Knicks had liked in the past in free agency. They had interest in him when he ended up re-signing in Minnesota. So that's somebody who you could say maybe, you know, they could re-engage on. Also, you look at the situation in Atlanta and which way the Hawks are going to go. They're a team that I think has been active in talks, but you look at that roster, you know, who could the Knicks realistically pry from them? Maybe a Justin Holiday if you're looking for depth. I know Tom Thibodeau in the past has been a fan of Holidays, but in a big picture sense with this Knicks team, you have to think about how do you upgrade the roster? Are you upgrading your rotation or your starting position in this deal? And how much do you have to give up to get a player like that? Like you talk about a Zach LaVine in Chicago. Where's the scenario for New York where Zach LaVine, you give up something that you're comfortable with, and then you know that he's coming in and he's going to take you to the next step? Just hard to see that sweet spot for the Knicks on a player like LaVine, where you're giving up something that you feel good about and you have enough left over to where you know LaVine, Brunson, Julius Randle are going to help take you to that next step in the East. So tricky decisions for every team to make here, including the Knicks as you approach the trade deadline. Well, that's it for this edition of Begley's Mailbag, but keep those questions coming in because we're going to be back soon answering your queries about the Knicks and the NBA. We'll see everybody very shortly.